So we have some of the most interesting, unique, and amazing meditations, I think, in the world. I mean, we have past life regression meditations, guided hypnosis meditations, Akashic record meditations, as well as healing meditations. Our meditations are pretty cool. And they're not just about stillness of mind and peace and sit there, I mean, we have those too. Don't get me wrong, but these are about meditations that are going to shift and change, and you're going to walk out of there feeling lighter, freer, healed, and even getting guidance and insight. So come down, experience one of our meditations. They're pretty badass. Hi, this is Cristina Dam, and this is Liberate the Podcast, where we educate, motivate, inspire, and liberate your consciousness. Hi there, everybody. Welcome to an episode of Deep Cuts. Today, we're going to deep dive into the Anunnaki, which is my newest, wormhole fascination that I just can't get enough of. And, this is Jerome, and you know him from some of the other podcasts and stuff, one of our amazing healers here at Liberate. And I was talking about the Anunnaki, and he's like, I know a lot about the Anunnaki. And so we figured, why not have a little podcast about the Anunnaki? Because, and some of you might be like, what the hell is an Anunnaki? So, Jerome, do you want to start out?
Yeah. Okay. So you brought this up the other day, and it made sense. It wasn't just totally out of the blue, but I was like, oh my God, I haven't really had a conversation about that recently. And so you started talking about it, you mentioned it, and then I started realizing, oh my gosh, yeah, there are all these things I had read about it or I'd heard about it, and coming from all sorts of different outlets, even NASA being one of them. In terms of kind of its connection to Nibiru, and sometimes that's also called Planet X. But yeah, that is something that it just started kind of getting the wheels turning on that thought again. And I don't know. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's something I just hadn't thought about, but it's really, really intriguing.
It's intriguing and it's fascinating. And in the last decade, there's been so much uncovering of kind of information and facts and things that prove some of the same things. So let's backtrack real quick, okay? So what are we talking about? We're talking about an ancient alien civilization that engineered and created us, humans. And so and this goes in by the Sumerian tablets in the text that, so the Sumerians were the oldest living civilization that had written form. And so this predates the Bible, all of this stuff. And the Sumerian text and the stories in the Sumerian text are some of the same stories are in the Bible. And so this predates that. And these are beings that in those texts, they say that these beings came down from another planet. I can't ever say that. And they gave them, they've created them, and through that gave them gifts along the time. Okay, so we're gonna get into a little bit of all of this, and how there's actually science that backs a lot of this stuff, which is fascinating, that has just been coming out. And, when Jerome's mentioning NASA, it was in 2015 that Caltech scientists said they made a claim in a report saying that they think that they have identified another planet in our galaxy. And so this planet, and they haven't seen it yet, but they can estimate by the different other rock formations and stuff that circle around it and have an orbit, that more than likely this is a planetary force. And so and through further recent years, there's been more and more facts that kind of support that, and even a new kind of research and findings as they feel that the planet's coming closer in 2018, saying that it actually kind of is getting a little bit more similar to what the Sumerian text had said, which they said that it had an orbit that went around our sun every 3,600 years. And that when that orbit went around close to Earth, it
created cataclysmic events.
Well, yeah, and that was
one of the side effects.
Yeah, so we'll get into that. But then they were able to come over to Earth to initially mine for gold, and we're going to get to that in a minute. And then, but this every 3,600 years is this orbit, okay? And in the Sumerian text, they say that its mass is roughly 4 times the size of Earth. Well, the interesting thing, when these Caltech scientists came up with this planet in 2015, they had initially first thought that it was roughly 10 times the size of Earth and had an orbit that was 10,000 years. Well, in 2018, after more calculations and understanding, they came down significantly and said, no, the rotation is somewhat around 5,000 years, and it's about 5 times the size of Earth. So my theory is that when it comes a little closer, that number is going to drop to 3,600, and it's going to be 4 times the size of Earth. So anyways, share a little bit about, the beginning.
In the beginning, no. Like, it was my first remembrance of kind of like learning about this idea, this concept, was that they had kind of seen this weird little anomaly when they were looking, into the nether reaches of what our technology can look at in outer space. And they had noticed in this one particular direction that there were some stars that they knew were there. They've been monitoring them. And then they just kind of blacked out. And they were there. They were just kind of like gone for a time. And then they'd come back. They weren't really sure why that was in the first iteration. And then it happened again. And they realized that it looked like there might have been something like an object that was passing in front of it because of the timing in which these stars, which they knew to have been there, that they had been blacked out. Mm-hmm. And so what they started recognizing and started kind of, tracking was if it was going to be some sort of body. They didn't know if it was a planetary body or what if it was some sort of starship or something. They didn't know. And so they started trying to calculate the amount of time that these stars were blacked out and the magnitude of these stars that they knew of, and how long they would have to, from the size of the star, how long or how large the subject would have to be for passing in front of that type of magnitude, and being able to kind of like block out that light. And they started realizing further and further along that this must have been some sort of planetary body, because when they would black out, it was on what would be considered to be an orbital rotation. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the next things that kind of had me reading even further than that was that it seems like that there is a theory, at least, and I don't know this, I'm not an astronomer myself, but there is a theory that it is in fact a part of a binary system. Are you familiar with like binary or trinary or quaternary star system? There's systems where if you have a binary star, they basically operate off of each other's gravity. Okay. So if you have 2 stars, this will be star 1, star 2. They will come together, and the closer they come together, the quicker they actually go. And then when they get really close, they basically slingshot around each other and fling each other further apart. And then they have to slowly over time come back together again and like this, and then kind of swing back out. So that was the idea, and that they were saying that it's possible that this could actually be a binary, like a binary star that is possibly binary to our sun. And that was in the closer proximity that particular star would have to our planet, or any other planet, really, that you would actually start to see a higher level of erratic environmental change happening.
Interesting.
And I thought that was really, really amazing, and that our science is kind of just now beginning to be aware of it, as of 2015. Yeah. But we've been seeing this environmental change, and when you look at certain things like the Hopi prophecy, it talks about how the signals of the new age will basically be shown in the water. It will be in the land. It will be in the air, and all of these elemental cues that we'll get for the coming of the next age, which is just another way of saying environmental change.
And these environmental changes, we're going through these cycles and everything like that. But it's also like with the different forces of the planets or possibly this other sun and different things like that, if they're coming around, like let's say if this orbit is every 3,600 years or whatnot, you're having a different interplay on that could result into climate shifts, because there's an interesting thing happening on all of our planets right now is they're all having weird conditions, right? There's more solar flares, those kind of things.
From the sun, that's very true.
But there's these different types of like levels that they measure off of planets. Different planets have these other things. But if you say weird like weird anomalies happening on Jupiter, and you Google that, there's all these weird things
that
happening.
Storm that's been going on forever by our terms.
And there's more things like that on each of the planets, and these anomalies that are being noticed and seen, that they're happening in more frequencies, right, or frequently, and but that we'll get into that in a little bit. But let's go back to the Anunnaki real quick, okay? So, and one of the things that have always got me, and I don't know if it's gotten you, is that I'm a person that tries to put together little things, and sometimes things just don't add up, right? And there's been a lot of things in our history that do not add up, right?
Sure, absolutely.
And, one of the things that, in studying many different forms of spirituality, I like to look at different types of religious texts and things like that. And in the book of Genesis, let's just take that. Like one of the things that always got me was why before the Noah's Ark flood was all of these people ruled, and they use the word ruled, for 3,258 years. And then this person, 2,400 and this, and this one 4,000, 3,000, 2,000. But anyways, they're all in the thousands.
Right. It's something that's just absolutely bizarre for our current understanding of what somebody can rule.
And there's been these forums and things that have went out, because then after the Noah's Ark flood, everybody lives with normal lifespans. It's like 87 years, 75, 92, blah, blah, blah. And so it was always interesting. And one of the bigger things on some of the forums is they said, well, they must have measured the years different back then and blah, blah, blah. But it was it's the same book accounting for the same things, and why would they change their measuring system, right? And so that was always something that stood out as a little weird. The other thing is Homo erectus to Homo sapiens. They've never found the genetic link between,
missing link, right? Exactly.
And so it's okay, you go from pretty much these caveman type people to these sophisticated beings. Interesting.
In a rather short period of time, too. And ridiculously short.
Ridiculously short.
Comparatively.
And then, the pyramids. How the hell are they built? And then, but it's not even just the pyramids, like the old site of Babylon or these different other cities that have these huge, massive pillars that are four stories tall or more, that are perfectly carved, and the different things, and how the heck did they get them up there? And they put more things on top of it with what forces?
How?
How did that happen? How did the pyramids get built? Still things that baffle scientists today, engineers today. Okay. And then you go a little bit further on some of these things is one of the things that always baffles me is we have 64 codons in our DNA and only 20 of them are turned on. Interesting. Okay. And so, you keep on going. Why do we value gold over all other minerals? Why did it become the most valuable force? Right. And so there was all these.
Where did we learn this behavior?
Yeah. Where did we learn this? Where did we get this? And so, in studying, there's the theory of the Anunnaki, and they came back, they were, 200,000 years ago, and the theory goes that I don't say theory is kind of irrelevant because it's written about on clay tablets, that it's there, so
their testimony.
So it's the Sumerian culture, and it's right there, and they talk all the accounts
in cuneiform and everything, and
even in the book of the Bible, in the book of in the Bible, they say in the gods made man of us, but not. And in the likeness of us, but not us.
Right.
And there's a plural there. talking about God, but it's us. And then like in the likeness of us, but not us. Okay, so the theory goes, or the written texts describe that the Anunnaki came down, they started mining for gold because their ozone layer was getting thin, and if they could blast the gold into it, it could stabilize it and could create a warming climate. That's what it says in the fucking text. And so, so they come down, and they weren't that much more advanced than where we are today, 200,000 years ago, but they were slightly more advanced than we are today. So I'm thinking they're orbiting around every 3,600 years. They say another blue planet, and they have some kind of technology that tests that there's gold here. And when they're close to us, take their space shuttles, land on our Earth, just like we're trying to land on Mars and do stuff there. And they come down and they start mining for gold. And every 3,600 years, it gets picked up, right? And so, because they have these incredibly long lifespans of like hundreds of thousands of years, you know? And after a certain period of time, they don't want to keep on being down here mining for gold. And their civilization has advanced to the point where they can do cloning and genetically engineering. So they had a thing where they said, well, maybe we can make slaves to do the mining for us. And they took Homo erectus and their DNA and did a little petri dish experiment and created us. That's what it says in the text, in the tablets. I mean, it's a pretty interesting story to have written in a freaking clay tablet, don't you think?
I absolutely do. And I think it's interesting also how we see so many representations of this hybridization in so many different cultures that at that time, by our current understanding, these cultures should not have had contact with each other. I mean, if we look at some of the gods in Egypt, okay, we have Anubis, the jackal, god, and we have in Hinduism we have Ganesh, who is the elephant, head of god, and we have just all of these hybrid animals, or I would say almost kind of humanoid bodies with animal heads. It just as odd that every, or so many at least, culture would have had this understanding of this, and that this was something that could be done, even, because that's not really a presumed thought. At least that's not one I would have. And maybe I'm just different and weird, but for that to exist in so many different parts of the world that technically shouldn't have been in communication with each other, or having the same experiences, it does beg the question.
Yeah, and that they do these statues of these bigger beings with, the animalmorphic head in the body. And I mean, what's the purpose of that? If they look differently, or is that how they looked, right? And then, so that's always a question. So then it goes a little further, and then they create us. And it's interesting because in the Sumerian text is the Adam and Eve story. It's slightly different there. They say that they make them, they have some horrible mutations that happen, and they say that they had mutations. They say that they had problems, that the human that they were creating didn't work right, or they had different types of defects. Yes. And they write about this, and then it took a while, and then they were sterile and they couldn't reproduce. And there was all of these things written in these texts. Again, I'm going to keep them going back to that. And then, so they didn't do just one person and one person. They did 7 men and 7 women, which makes way more sense when you think about it, because if you sleep with your brother or your cousin, you have a mutated baby. And yet it was really weird that if all of humanity came from Adam and Eve, and then Adam and Eve would have to be sleeping with their daughters or their whatnot to create and procreate, talking about incest from the beginning. I'm not trying to, whatever, but it makes more sense that it was 7 and 7, and it created this, dynamic of these more gene pool that could continue to, make these slaves. I mean, we were slaves.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the idea behind it. It's interesting. Again, this is something I don't personally know, but I am curious as to what the genetic deviation needs to be in order to dodge most of the genetic, I guess, hazards for kind of reproducing with each other. I'm wondering if it's like a 7 iteration deviation. I don't know, but that would be very interesting to
Yeah,
to find
I
out.
wonder. But the other interesting thing, proven in our genome when they actually look through our DNA, is that one of our chromosomes to the next actually show a hybrid fusion in it. And they say that that's only happens when people like mess with it like in labs and stuff like that. But there's these two chromosomes that have this weird fusion that goes on in our DNA that looks like it has been scientifically messed with, and it's an anomaly that is in our DNA. This is stuff you can fact check. Go and look at it. It's there, okay? And so, with that being said, that's always bizarre. In the fact that they only turned on 20 of our codons, okay? Which I have a theory about that, of these enlightened beings that are going on and stuff. One, they try to make us so we wouldn't reach our potential, so that they could continue to have power over us. But
some stunting the growth a little bit.
Yes, completely stunting the growth. And I think as we activate more of these codons, we'll find ourselves having extremely longer life expectancies, being able to do telekinesis, doing other things. And I think that individuals that have been very enlightened or can do magical powers or different things like that, or have these other states of being, I honestly think that they just have activated an extra codon or something in their system.
And I absolutely think that's possible. I mean, I think that science is something that will always be it'll be very well done and executed when done, properly. But I don't think that by nature, it's something that's supposed to simply be static. I think over time, with anything that has to do with life, it's going to change. It's going to morph. I don't think that this is something that you can just simply put a cap on and leave it that way. How many times have you had an experience of where you go to say something and you say it at the same time as somebody else, and there's that connection that's there, and you feel like that also kind of draws you in a little bit closer, or that you have this certain thought of, oh my God, I need to call somebody, and you call and they're like, oh my God, this thing just happened to me. I think these are little flickers of where we can go, what we have the capacity to do.
Yeah.
But it's been capped. It's like a little bit of light that's kind of escaped out. Yeah. But by and large, it is being suppressed to a certain degree. I don't think telekinesis is that wild of a concept. Yeah,
and then we can go into the conspiracy theory of it, but I'm not even going completely there yet. I'm just talking about where this is and why this has these interesting facts that line up, or these coincidences that have been occurred in different stories or texts over time. That's all I was saying. And so with that though, I feel like there's so much more that gives me insight, and I'm like, there's so much more that we can tap into when we learn how to activate these other aspects of ourselves. But then if you go and you fast forward a little bit, so they created these humans. And one of the other aspects that are very much scientifically proven too, is after the Noah's Ark flood. Now, in the Sumerian text, it's I can't remember the name of the human that Aniki was in charge of the Earth Project. Okay, so he had a brother that I forgot the brother's name, but the Aniki was like the good one that was in charge of the Earth Project, and then he had the brother that had a little bit higher ranking. Do you remember the brother's name?
It's one of those things where I probably would have said it and I just completely forget about it.
Okay.
Is Enki and
yeah, I think it starts with an N or something.
He was definitely the least popular brother. That's why we don't remember it.
Then they knew that this planet was coming back around, their planet, and we were having weather warming conditions on planet Earth, and with how it orbited in their advanced technology, they knew that it was going to have a catastrophic, I can't say that word.
Catastrophic
event on our planet. And so they had a council meeting, or so it's said in the text or whatever. And they wanted to just leave us all to die, because they weren't sure whether the planet would be habitable again after this event. And however, Anunnaki or
Enki. And they do sometimes go by slightly different variations from one culture to the next.
Yeah, so Enki or Anunnaki or whatever, it's just said differently. Enki, he goes and he writes down and shares with Noah. No, we know it as Noah, but again, I don't remember the other name in the other story. And shares how to build a ship, but really they talk about it being a submarine, to save and preserve humanity and some of the animals and things like that.
Right.
Which is interesting because that story gets retold as Noah's Ark and that whole story. So, but after that, where the science comes in, which is interesting, is that the water receded. They ended up settling where the submarine or whatever washed up on shore in the mountain range, whatever, and as it settled and the people came, the story goes that they were actually the Sumerians. The Anunnaki were up in the space watching the whole event, and they were in their spaceships, and they were happy to find out that the humans were saved and that the animals were saved. And that they came down and they saw that the planet could be reestablished, and that they knew that they had most of the population had all been wiped out. So they knew that they had to help them also redistribute, repopulate, and also, build some kind of sustainability, right?
Sure.
Because it was almost like they had
infrastructure.
They had this heart for them, And so in that period of time, that's where it's said in the Bible that they were given the gift from God of agriculture and pharmaculture, however it's worded. But the science behind it is the wheat, germ, and all these different seeds dated back in that time were hybrid seeds. This is the first time they're farming in all of history. They go from Neanderthal type of like artifacts and discovery to these people kind of artifacts and things like that. And suddenly they're the seeds that they're using to grow their crops. They thought that it would take the humans like 10,000 years to figure out how to do that hybrid. And here they are like making the hybrids. But that's because the seeds just came up from up above, right?
Interesting.
So, and that was when the ruling actually got, because you got to think most of the Anunnaki retreated back into outer space and out of the planet. So they weren't as many prior to the flood. Everybody left, right? So there was only some that stayed back. And so for the first time you're seeing after that the rulings were actually humans starting, and that's where the lifespans and this person ruled, and it was for such a shorter period of time. Because prior to that, it was the Anunnaki ruling. And then if you ever are familiar with this word in the Bible called the Nephilim, that is actually the species of, so humans, Homo erectus, and Anunnaki. That human mixed with Anunnaki created a Nephilim. Right. And so the Nephilim were hybrids from human and Anunnaki. So they were more godlike.
Right.
And they
almost like the Titans of old.
Yeah. And one of the people, which was one of the first rulers prior to the flood and stuff, was Gilgamesh. Now, Gilgamesh's tomb was just discovered in 2002. They found it.
I must have forgotten that. Okay, wow.
And they went in and did this military raid, took the tomb, and you're telling me they spent millions of dollars doing this military raid, stealing the tomb. It's in the news. Check it out. Gilgamesh's tomb discovered, 2002, CNN, Fox. You see the articles when you Google. And then all they needed to do was test that for DNA and see that it wasn't all human. And you know what they said? We don't want to investigate it any further. I call bull on that. You don't go in and raid a country and steal a tomb and not DNA test it. The curiosity alone, I would be like, I just need to know,
No, absolutely. I mean, that would definitely, just to even kind of confirm that this is kind of the person that you think that it is, or maybe even that, in that same time frame, you're going to want to do that. I think to kind of give an answer such as we don't want to go further with it is saying that they already have gone further.
Oh yeah, and they can't tell
they don't want to really discuss it any further is what they want to do.
Yeah, which is interesting. So that comes up. Another thing that got discovered just recently was so when the Anunnaki came down, they settled in Mesopotamia, but where their first gold mine was in South Africa. Okay, so the southeast tip of Africa is where they were mining for gold.
Okay. Is this over close to Madagascar, or are you referring to Madagascar, or like the kind of southeastern side of the continental?
Southeastern side of the continental.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, so as a continent, not as South Africa, right? So, and then that place, they found just recently these weird formations that form these weird grids all over that date back, get this, 200,000 years. And what some scientists say is that they had this weird, interesting, remember this is very advanced civilization, but they have this weird, they have something to do with sonic resonances. And they have the ability to be used for mining, and specifically they have this resonance of gold. So they just discovered the gold mines from 200,000 years ago. The other interesting, that was where they first genetically altered their slaves. Guess where they have traced our mitochondria? They have taken a human mitochondria and they've went back into see where it could trace.
Right.
The same location in Africa. Interesting. Like right by where the gold mines are that they discovered.
That is a bit curious. Again, that does beg the question. That's really interesting that they did that mitochondrial study, because that tends not to be how we think of our lineage. We think of it as definitely more something that's patriarchal. But the mitochondrial DNA is passed down through the mother's side, and only through the mother's side. So they're literally going back through the maternal lineage to be able to kind of find this, which I think that's a great way to kind of go back and look at, and it's a great way of exhausting all the options and opportunities. And yeah, why not check the maternal side as well as the paternal side?
Right? Isn't it fascinating though?
Yeah.
Right?
No, it absolutely is.
And it's and with all of this, it's it kind of begs questions of again, these are all the things that I found it was answering and checking off.
Sure.
I'm not saying it's 100% with certainty, but it's a little interesting that there would be these texts that tell everything, but they're also very hidden and not talked about much, and because they would stir up a lot of belief systems, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, here it is, people have been worshiping the God, right? And in whatever culture, and they have designed their whole life around these certain religious texts and core values and belief systems. Mm-hmm. And suddenly there's these scientific evidence that points into the direction of these older texts that predate any of these biblical texts.
Right.
And that, by many, many years, and these tell a different story.
Absolutely.
They say in the text that they were given this by beings above. They specifically say that. Not these beings from above came and gave us this. They taught us this. They engineered us. They did all these things. It tells the story that aliens came here and created us. Now, that's a very different story than we evolved and had this spiritual kind of thing. And it doesn't mean that we are not spiritual. I totally believe in spirit. I totally believe in different connections. I think there's many different dimensions that are going on. And I think that there's many different higher beings and different varieties of life,
sure.
right? But for us in this physical incarnation, that is mind-blowing for many people,
Yeah. Absolutely.
We were made as slaves to mine gold.
Yeah, it certainly is a different perspective. And I also find that there are so many, maybe that's kind of what we need to be moving toward, or what it is that we need to be kind of looking toward, or becoming more open to receiving, because a lot of the stories that we're seeing that do kind of allude, at least, to some of this stuff, is about broadening the perspective. If we look at the Book of Enoch, okay, they're talking about they took Methuselah, who, by the way, is described as having a very oddly kind of dark yet somewhat sparkly skin. It was kind of not. He was like, his skin would glow. And that was a little bit different. He was different because of that. Now, we all know that Methuselah had an extremely long life as well. Like, this is not anything remotely close to what we would consider a human being able to live to. Okay, so that there's, in the Book of Enoch, they tell the story of how, he was taken by the guardians, and that he was taken into the sky, and that he was shown the earth from above. Before they returned him. And when he returned, let me put it that way, when he returned, decades had passed.
Yeah.
And that this was like this brand new theory, but which I guess we could kind of understand from some of the things that we're more aware of today, that, what if they took him into a spaceship and that they showed him the earth from above and maybe took him somewhere else and then brought him back. And yes, of course, time would pass. But at the same time, that was kind of allowing for him to kind of become this enlightened person by seeing this different perspective, seeing the earth from above, seeing possibly, I don't know, different planet, different beings. I do not know that. Just saying, potentially. That is a huge expanse to one's perspective. And then to come back and bring this back to the planet, and being able to kind of share that, and you start planting seeds in people's minds, and then their minds start expanding. That in itself could very much be like an ARC system, where you're basically treating one individual as a repository for these other possibilities, and not even just possibilities, but other facts.
Yeah.
And then they're able to bring that back and then kind of partake in that again with other people, and just share that. And I think that it's just kind of a testament of how important it is for all of us, even today, regardless of our belief system, to just be open to there being another possibility, to take it into consideration, to just start off with, what if I was wrong and they were right? We still get to kind of champion our own values and morals, but at the same time, if we just start off listening, just hearing that expanse or that other person's point of view, it is going to broaden our perspective. We don't have to agree with it, but it does broaden our perspective. And
the more we broaden our perspective, I mean, things have been changing throughout history all the time. I mean, once upon a time, people thought the world was flat. So, like the different shifts that are going on, right?
Right.
I know there's the flat earthers out there that still think it's flat, but, yes, I'm just saying, I'm sorry, didn't mean to offend. Okay, so everybody with their own belief system, okay? Maybe Antarctica is just a wall that it stops.
In Earth theory, too, yes.
Okay. So,
hollow Earth.
So with that though, I think there's one point to kind of go back to too, going back on, talking about this and things like that with these longer lifespans that are even mentioned there, right? Is, the whole story goes that the Anunnaki were ruling theirself, and that they made these hybrids that could live longer and have more superpowers, right? More advanced beings, and they became the rulers. And then they slowly passed on the baton to the humans. But I wonder if, it's very, it drew the question in my mind of, why are we so obsessed with bloodlines and ruling, right? And it's maybe, and I think maybe some people, because when you mix DNA, and they found this recently too, okay, which I'm just going off on tangent. I'm just thinking about this for the first time, FYI. Okay. So, but when you mix DNA, okay. They found in doing a lot more genetic testing that you don't get the same petri dish from both of your parents.
Right. Yes,
know?
exactly.
And so, there was once upon a time when I was back in school studying biology, they thought that you get, half your genes from your mom, half your genes from your dad, and that your genes, you should have the same genes as your siblings, but just different like things a little turned on or off, but the same type of like variety as far as like ethnic backgrounds and different things like that. And then, all these DNA kits, it became super easy for people to test, and they completed the genome and then, all of the stuff and mapped it out. And then they found that a brother and sister from the same two paternal parents would have a completely like different ratio mix of their background histories.
Sure.
And some might have like, let's say, 34% Scottish, and their biological sibling has 10% Scottish.
Right.
And it was like interesting, right? And so one of the things that I'm thinking about in this moment is I wonder whether some people that have like these more advanced kind of things that go on or stuff that they got a little bit more of, because the Nephilim, which were mix of human and Anunnaki. I wonder if they continued to procreate, because they do talk about it in there, but their offspring created this, and that there's some people that have just a little bit more of the Anunnaki DNA in their energetic vibration. I that's interesting. And I wonder if those people were people like, I don't know, Jesus and Buddha and these other...
who were able to turn it on a little bit more, had more codons that were activated as opposed to others. So they're able to do something a little bit different. It seemed like it was just absolutely magic and miraculous to other people who didn't understand what was going on.
Yeah, like maybe instead of 50% Anunnaki, they were like 75% Anunnaki, and they had more things go on.
Yeah.
That's a good theory.
That's entirely a possibility. And I think
Jesus was more Anunnaki.
Maybe. I think that when we start looking at the similarities of how these ascended masters or people who are just kind of capable of doing a little bit more, who stood out as individuals of their entire time, I think it's really interesting to look at how these people tended to stand out in the same ways.
Yeah.
It wasn't always 100% exactly the same, but this person could perform miracles. This person could perform miracles. This person was incredibly quick of mind. This person was incredibly quick of mind. It just, when you start kind of looking at it, I'm not saying they're all the same person, but I am saying that it, kind of going back to the codon concept, that it makes sense that when these extra elements might be turning on or might be firing, that they're going to be the same ones.
Yeah. Yeah. And quite the opposite too, because, you all know some people that are a little like special.
Well, absolutely. But that's like the animal kingdom, right?
But listen to this though, like, because, okay, so you still had the, like Homo erectus and other things, and you had the Neanderthals and everything.
Sure,
So there was evolution that was going on simultaneously. And this evolution was able to procreate with the new Homo sapiens. So there is like, when they do genetic testing, they can find Neanderthal blood in your system.
Absolutely.
And so, I wonder if people that are just a little bit more, not quite as activated, maybe have a little less of our pure human DNA, and they have a little bit more Neanderthal and other things like that.
I certainly think it's one to...
Because we're talking about the special people, and we're also talking about the people that maybe like just seem more primitive mind. Like they want to get in the fights, they want to do more response, and more like like they're more of that primitive mindset. I'm just like, again, I'm throwing things out there. I have totally. I'm just thinking off my feet, but I'm wondering if this starts to showcase a lot for people, right? Because it doesn't mean, again, there's nothing wrong with anybody of how they are. I'm just, there's a very different variety of humans that exist.
Yeah.
And there's a very different,
without a doubt.
you know,
Sure.
and so I'm just saying to give us more variety over time, there was also all of these other hybrids that were happening that could have had, you know, whether it was a little bit more Anunnaki or a little bit more of some of the primitive, you know, kind of humanoid
at what point do you
people.
pass that tipping point of kind of having codon number 23 activated, or 24 or 25, 26? You know, that's something we don't know.
Yeah.
But I think that it's not that far of a stretch to realize that, oh, okay, so the genome sequence every 164th person, random number, every 164th person slips a little bit, and somebody ends up coming out with a little bit more capability. Okay, like these are the people we're
These are the people that they're pulling in. They can move things off the floor.
yeah, right.
You're like,
exactly.
how are you creating levitation? You know?
Yeah, well, absolutely. The people that are breaking new, that are, I guess, participating in groundbreaking thoughts and theories that, new mathematical appliances, you know, or applications rather, to just being able to use it in certain ways, certain concepts. The people who are just out of nowhere breaking world records, you know, unenhanced, but, you know, like in either running or pole vaulting or you know, just something having to do with the ability and capability of the human body, and what it's able to achieve. Like, that's somebody who's kind of activated and able to do something just so much better. They're the kind of that first one through the barrier. They're able to do it so much better that then kind of almost through the process of seeing that and witnessing that, bearing witness to it, that it's almost like the rest of the people around become activated through seeing that, like realizing, oh, wow, you can run a marathon in under, you know, this time.
Or run under the 4-minute mile. Perfect example of that. Before then, science says it can't be done. And
exactly, the human body is structured to be able to handle that.
And then the moment that, oh my God, I'm slipping on his name. Eric with a B. Bannister, no. What?
Who
ran the 4-minute mile. The year he did it, nobody did it. And then this is exactly that. He breaks it. He runs under a 4-minute mile. That same year, like, I forget how many, it was like in the tens. It wasn't like a huge amount, but it was like maybe like 17 people or something like that. And it ran it under 4 minutes, but nobody ever did it before. And then the following year after that, even a more greater population was able to do it. And so far, then now it's like, that's easy. Now they're breaking like under, you know, like way better records than that.
Absolutely.
So that goes into that belief system of I can see it and then I can believe it. I can open my mind to a possibility, because I think beyond all of this is, you know, some people might be hearing this and say, oh, well, we were created as slaves and all of that. But like, stop, and you can look at that kind of thing, or we have this amazing life experience that we're a fraction of our capacity is tapped into. And when I say a fraction of it, and like, we don't even know what we're powerful, how powerful we can be. But if there's things like that have occurred throughout history, of people becoming aware and then being able to create, do, or achieve, you know, it's like, how much more can we do, right? How many more, like, what's our capability? And, you know, 20 is less than a third of our codons. So like, we're at less than a third of our potential right now.
And I think, first of all, I hear you, and I think that's a fantastic concept to champion. If for no other reason, why not continue to push forward? Yeah. You know, and what if the fault in our reasoning as humans is to think that we in fact have a capacity? Yeah, absolutely. What if it's, you know, capacity does kind of dictate that there is a limit. Yeah. You know, and what if there is not one? You know, and maybe that's what we're slowly inching forward to. Yeah, inching forward to this, there is no limit, and that there's so much more that we don't know, right? And I mean, all of this can be a theory, a story, you know, different things that do line up, and it's very,
I mean, it grabbed my attention of seeing all of these holes that I had questions about kind of line up with, some science behind it. I mean, this is like, okay, they discovered another planet just recently, has a weird orbit like they described in the book. Oh, the mitochondria linked to that place in Africa. Oh, they just discovered these gold mines that they think are at least 200,000 years old. Like, I mean, these are things that are like, okay, if what we're finding literally in the last 10 years, from Gilgamesh's tomb to all these other things to they just discovered a lot of the biblical cities in the recent years. They didn't know that. They thought that those were all fantasies and stories.
Right. And they even stopped looking for some of them.
And then now they're uncovering them and they're finding it as our technology is becoming more advanced. They can notice these ruins and other things and far-reaching jungles and other places where, or under the sea that they didn't notice or they couldn't have the capability to find or discover before.
Right.
And there was a belief system in their mind that this was all fantasy anyways.
Absolutely.
And then suddenly they're all like, so if some of the things, I just beg people to ask, or to kind of ask the question, if some of the things that have been written about, whether in the Bible or whether in the Sumerian texts and tablets, if some of those things have proved to be reality, why wouldn't most of it or all of it be reality? Most people, when they write, they either write, fiction or nonfiction, right? It's either stories and allegories or it's facts and tales of truth and reenactments or that,
Absolutely. Either way, there's still inspiration.
Yeah, but they don't tend to really bounce back and forth within the same text. It's like, okay, this is things that really happen. Then they don't get into like, oh, this is just a fantasy tale. And then this isn't, this is, and so I can't help but to think that maybe all of it could be real. And maybe, but we're supposed to be finding out soon anyways, right? Like Planet X is coming. And if Planet X is coming, that means that this planet that houses the alleged Anunnaki are going to be close to us again. And if they're close to us again, one, it's going to be super weird if we see this planet. Maybe we're also having a climate shift and a warming of our climate. Are we going to put ourselves at risk that when this planet crosses our orbit, that we have another catastrophic event of a flooding or a massive flooding? Because how it describes it is that a sheet of ice, because of the ice, the climate was warming, fell into the ocean and created a tsunami with 80-foot waves. The interesting thing is, why are they saying all this? 80-foot waves, tsunami. I mean, I don't know if it would, but it measured back to feet or whatever. But they're giving pretty specifics,
Yeah, that's something that's very true, and I think it's something that we probably, because of the advent of the internet and things like that, where it seems like more people have kind of been understanding this more relatively, but more recently, because I think this information is getting out in a much more palatable way. But there are. You're absolutely right. The numbers, the measurements that are out there are just insanely accurate. I mean, look at the three pyramids in Egypt, in the Valley of the Kings. It's just like how close they are to the stars that they are directed towards. And that's something we would have a sincerely difficult time doing with our technology today.
I mean, these were supposed to be primitive humans.
Absolutely. Moving all those bricks and blocks with pulleys and levers.
The other thing is like, this is, think about all of the things that the Sumerian culture brought us.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
They brought us.
They
brought us. Yeah, they brought us that. They brought us the calendar. They brought us our thing of time. They brought us the invention of currency. They did. They had a hierarchy of rules. They had marriage and divorce things that went on. So they had modern government. That was one of the foundations of Mesopotamia and the Sumerian culture. Mm-hmm. It was the first written language. Okay, so they have written language. They had that. They had agriculture and pharmaculture. They invented the calendar with precise accuracy and, they were the ones with 60 seconds in a minute and this and 24 hours in a day and created all of that. The wheels, the pulleys, modern machinery, look these things up. They like have a list of like 50 things that we use in modern
they're still viable even to this day. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, how did we go from nothing to like massive structured democratic society and writing and language?
Absolutely. I mean, this really shows in contrast when you look at your phone and realize how many updates you had to receive recently. And these systems are still in place from way back then. It's phenomenal. Now, I can also understand.
And they say that they also wrote about all the planets in our galaxy.
Oh yeah,
and it was like
how even in artwork, sculptures.
And I mean there's like this one plaque type stone thing. I forgot what it's called, but they show the sun in the middle with all the planets around it, and it's like the same number of planets if you include
Pluto.
if you include Pluto and Planet X or the new.
Oh, Planet X. Oh, that's right. Yeah, but 10.
Yeah, and so it's on there, and they're different sizes and they're different dynamic, and they put it in more like one circle, but they're dotted, and it's like, But they talk about these different planets. They talk about, and they even talked about there's a theory that they have about how there was actually a 10th planet. Okay. Oh, fact. I like the science behind this. Okay. So scientists have come up with the way that where water is found in other regions and around other suns is that it measures out between like 2,000 and 5,000 AUs from the sun. Okay. So not 2,000, I think 5,000 would, don't mark me on this, but the Earth is 1 AU. Okay. And this belt of where water, before it, so it doesn't melt away from the sun when it's forming, when it's becoming like super unstable, when a sun after like a little explosion, all the mass and stuff like that. So in other areas, they haven't detected any possibility of water until like what they theorize is that it's like it's in this range of like 5 AUs out. And that is the range of whatever the other AU is, but up to 5 AUs or something like that. And that is where water starts to be found in different galaxies. The sun's only at 1, our Earth is only at 1. Okay. So with that and where it is, that's where our asteroid belt is. Okay. Our asteroid belt is composed of all water molecule asteroids. They have high intensity of water, okay? And there are these little water balls, right, floating around, okay? There is a way that mathematically the equation that lines up for the space that planets are supposed to be spaced apart, that it seems like there's a formula. And there should be a planet located in our asteroid belt. And it's not, okay? And they wonder, why is it all this rubbish that is circling there where planets should be, okay? And so there's a theory that they haven't been able to kind of fully understand our Earth and the closeness of our Earth and why it would have water on it in the way that it does. And Mars is another one too. So they could be part of the same. But there's a theory that there was an actually 10th planet.
Yes. And
this 10th planet orbited in this area. And due to our wonderful Anunnaki planet coming through, Nibiru, I can never say the name right, so I'm getting Planet X, whatever. So it comes around and it ruins everything in the galaxy, causes everything to go off kilter. But if you follow that as a possibility and open mind for science, it explains all of the things that we can't explain. Why is Uranus turned on its side, right? And it has this weird
the rings. Why is that kind of?
It's upside. It's like this instead of right like this, and it has a weird tilt to it that matches none of the other planets. Interesting. And so they feel like maybe it could have gotten pulled with some kind of gravitational pull to be turned, right? So if this planet came in, or if it got hit with another planet, and came in and it shattered some of it. And then part of it became dislodged. Part of that became Earth and the moon. And that's why the Earth and the moon are made of the same material. Right. So that there was this collision that happened, and that's where the remaining of it is in the astral belt. And then our Earth and our moon are part of this remnants.
Right.
And we suddenly got flung into 1 AU away from the sun. And the interesting thing about it is this might be why the Earth is such a special planet. Because there's a lot of like spiritual kind of beliefs and teachings that Earth is like nothing else.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I always said, well, if there's all these other stars in the sky, there's got to be lots of different Earths. But I didn't know the science behind a water-forming planet never happens that close to the sun. And so we have this amazing tropical landscapes and beauty and different diversity of life. And we have this rich water planet in a not natural close position to the sun. And if this did happen and this collision happened, that would be such a rare event for a collision to have to happen and hit just right to pull one planet into a new orbit and to create this new mass and this new planet. So if that could be like our Earth could be one in like God knows what measuring system, that out of all of those, galaxies that are out there, that we really have one of the rarest ecosystems in the whole universe.
Just how unique it is. Yeah. That I could see that. I could see where that would be. And, I guess kind of one thing that's sort of, that I'm curious about, and I have heard that the moon and the Earth were kind of like of the same material and split apart due to a cataclysmic kind of collision. But the water that is on Earth, and I guess in liquid form, at least now, maybe it was frozen at one point, but for the proximity of the moon and the Earth, why would the Earth's water be more liquid, whereas the moon is pretty much a desert? There has been, well, actually, and this might explain it, because there are seas. There's a sea of tranquility there, and there are things that or land masses that we've identified as being places where water had been. But the fact that it doesn't have an atmosphere might actually be the reason why. So that just kind of went out into space. So that, I guess I kind of answered my own.
Which is why they needed to mine for gold, is they were having an atmosphere problem, right? And so like they knew based on their long lifespans and traveling around, that without that, they were going to become a dry, desolate planet, right? Without life form. Sure. And so it's just, so in these tablets, it describes this 10th planet. It describes this process of how it came through and created mass destruction on the rest of the planets and created everything that is. So, it's just, again, it goes for that question. If some of these things line up and are true and can be proved, like mind-blowing proof, like kind of stuff of like, that goes on, whether it's the gold mine or the mitochondria, the different things like that, but, or even just the understanding of our solar system on this level, right? Like we have this solar system in this galaxy that like our unique solar system, our unique sun, our unique things, like it's just, I don't know.
It's very, very elusive and very intriguing. To just kind of, again, to take into consideration all of those possibilities, the idea of magnitude, even within our own solar system. You can fit 3.5 Earths inside of that red dot on Jupiter. That's just that tiny little red dot, which is a storm that's been raging for, and I forget how long, but like way longer than what we in this incarnation of human, species, what we've been around for. That's been going on for like ages. That storm has been, and the fact that it is larger, over 3 times larger than our entire planet.
Yeah.
Again, just the concept of that is.
Yeah, and it's about
remarkable.
It's about finding those other concepts, right? Like people can't like fathom how could somebody live, hundreds of thousands of years. Well, like our lifespan compared to a fly.
Exactly. Yeah. The fruit fly specifically has a 72-hour.
Yeah, it's like hours. It's like, and it goes through its whole life, and birth, growth, reproduction, and death, all in a matter of.
Absolutely.
And it probably wouldn't have that same experience, right? And so how can we? I mean, look at like things like some of the tortoises that, live for hundreds of years and stuff like that, so their lifespan's a lot longer than ours, right?
Yeah.
And
some parrots, yeah.
And then we have this certain lifespan, but we can't help but to always see things through our lens. And so we think, oh, well, this is how our life is. And most of the animals that live on the planet live within our lifespan or live shorter lifespans.
Right.
And so the thought process that we could be in a physical form for hundreds of thousands of years, like,
yeah, blows our minds. To a certain degree, I think that there are many who don't even want to think about that, because in terms of how the human body progresses and ages and or even decays, while it's still alive, but starts to break down, nobody would want to be in that state for hundreds of thousands of years. But what if it wasn't that quick, that state, it didn't come on, it just hit my 65th birthday or 70th birthday and I'm getting a little ache, like that could be, you might start having your first tooth come in at 70 years old for some of these species out there. Yeah. That's how broad, this perspective shift could be. And
I like that, your first tooth coming in at 70 years old. But I mean, it's true. And you look at like our measure of our time and things like that, and also there's so many factors that go into aging, right? It's been long talked about how like out in space the astronauts don't age in the same time frame as here, right. That there's like this almost stopping. And even there's been some movies that talk about that what is it, like Interstellar.
I just saw Interstellar like 2 weekends ago for the first time. And I was like,
and he's like out in space and on Earth, everything else has changed and all the lives go, but he hasn't aged at all. And he's, his like daughter's old now, and he's, and he's still driving a Lincoln. Yeah.
Matthew McConaughey. Is that right?
but it's like, it's like, we only know our lifespan based on our perception, but we also don't know the gravitational force and the elements and the proximity that our environment causes on our aging too, right?
Absolutely.
And so
stress levels.
And so if it's already been kind of proven that in an anti-gravity space or out in space, on the space, like they have a different type of aging process, right? Like that's been talked about. It's been public knowledge,
Absolutely.
So it makes sense that, I mean, I can't even like, I can, but I can't, but imagine going like 365 days to go around the sun, right? This is 3,600 years to go around the sun.
Yeah.
Not 3,600 days, 3,600 years measured in our time frame. What? Like to do one orbit?
Yeah.
Like I just wonder what other kind of animal species are on that planet and what that's like.
Really patient ones.
Oh man, so maybe we'll find out in our lifetime, because allegedly they're coming back.
Yeah, supposedly. Get the party
started.
Stocked.
But like I said, I was saying that like now with our global warming, that brings me back to that point, that there's a couple kind of things that they could be coming back, checking on us when they're back in a close proximity, sure. Seeing what the species that they created looks like, maybe feeling sorry for us for some of the destruction and the negative attributes that we had in society and through our creation, that they activate us and they teach us new ways, maybe even live among us for a while again. That would be interesting. I would love to see that in my lifetime. And, I don't think these are going to come in and they're going to try to kill us or conquer us. I mean, we're their creation and they've tried to help us throughout history. So I don't think you'd have to fear that. But one thing that is a fear that pops up in different kind of belief systems is if this planet is coming around and we are having this climate warming situation happen and these ice caps are melting. And this is what the story of Noah's Ark was written about, as far as from their angle, from their point of view, right? And that this ice sheet fell into the ocean because of the gravitational pull that was going on the planet while it passed, causing, a more turbulent type of thing than sure. creating that tsunami. I'm just saying, I'm not trying to be doomsday here, but there could be a big possibility that as this planet orbits, that we have another big, massive tsunami and flood and change and stuff happen. And so I think maybe we are prepared, and I'm sure that they're far more advanced at this point in time than they were, 200,000 years ago or whatever, whenever that would happen 100,000 years ago or whatever. But what could that look like, right? So I think that there's a lot of curiosity, and I don't know whether their orbit hits on a certain way, depending on how our orbit is every single time when it passes, because I'm sure it can't pass at the same exact moment because it's not having the same exact type of years every time, right? So our Earth could be over here, and then this could be over here, and then a different year, this could be over here, and our Earth over here, so it's a little closer. You know what I mean? It's kind of like how every year Thanksgiving falls on a different day. It's like the same kind of thing. It's like it's a little different because we're rotating around, and it's rotating around, and at the same time, it might not hit the same place, right?
Yeah, an environmental deviation. And that makes sense. That could happen.
Yeah. So I'm curious. Tune in for more later. Do you have anything else to share?
Oh, I just so much. I really need to kind of collect my thoughts a little bit more. But this was great. This was so much fun. Just kind of diving back into this. It's really expansive. If you're at all interested in it, go look it up a little bit. There are great books out there. Of course, you can find all sorts of stuff on the internet. Pick and choose what it is that makes sense to you, But yeah, the Anunnaki is a very interesting subject, just for consideration, if nothing else, as well as Planet X or Nibiru. And I think that you'll find a very interesting read that you're in store for. Yeah,
going down the rabbit hole. And, have fun with it. Open your mind and think, maybe, possibly. And, you can choose to pick and choose whatever you want. Remember, your life is your beliefs, and whatever you believe is your reality. And, so if none of this resonated with you, let it go. Let it be some kind of interesting talk that you heard that, and if it's something that did, go down the rabbit hole a little bit and see if some of the questions that you might have had about yourself or other things get answered. Whether it's why do we value gold, or what is this, and the missing links and the different stuff. But just see, maybe there's some things that pop out that say, huh.
Yeah, absolutely. And do a little historical research, like some of these things and talks that were actually in old newspapers from the old American West about flying objects that they saw in the sky. Very odd. It's not that long ago, but at the same time, these things are reported and have been saved. So just kind of.
Yeah, I mean, we can't be the only people in the galaxy or the universe, right? I mean, we have our little solar system, and even in that, there's possibility of other life forms like the Anunnaki in our very solar system. Yeah. And how many other things could possibly be out there that just because they have different timing, we haven't had the awareness because our lifespan, again, is this short in comparison to what others can be.
True.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Thank you for being here.
Have fun. If you enjoyed this conversation, like it, subscribe, and share it with your friends. If you want some more amazing resources on your path of liberation, head over to liberateyourself.com and sign up for our mailing list. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram at Liberate Hollywood, all one word, or Liberate Emporium, all one word. Until next time, liberate yourself. If you're thinking that you want to take that action step, why wait? Book your session right now. Go to liberateyourself.com, click on either Liberate Hollywood or Liberate Emporium, see our amazing practitioners and who resonates most with you. And then book a session via Skype, phone, or in person. We're here for you, and it's your time to start creating your life.